Angela Box is one of our most outspoken political analysts.
Filthy leftist stalkers out there, welcome back to my channel, where I always say what you were thinking. A lot of these things come back to what the Democrat Party has done to the black community.
It took an Anglo-Saxon looking woman to set everybody straight. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Hello, my name is Angela Box.
The Isiah Factor Uncensored starts right now.
And welcome to The Factor Uncensored. Thank you for joining us. Now it's on the top of many people's minds, the fighting in the Middle East. Well, President Trump has announced a 24-hour ceasefire between Iran and Israel in this 12-day war. But what does this mean for us here in America? We gathered a panel of experts to talk about it on The Factor Uncensored. Let's get to it.
Well, the gang's all here, guys, and we're talking about the conflict between Iran and now the United States, Israel as well. First of all, there were missiles fired at the military base, the U.S. military base in Qatar today. That's the latest that we're hearing. Your thoughts about that, Angela, and how you feel about this whole action by the United States and President Trump?
Well, I support it, and here's why. The Iranian mullahs have been a boil in the ass of humanity since 1979. This is far past time for this to happen, and let us not forget why we are here. It is because Barack Obama made the mullahs pinky promise him that they were not going to develop a nuclear weapon, but lo and behold, here we are. After that ridiculous accord with that John Kerry helped broker, Obama sent over $400 million of cash in pallets in the dead of night, which Iran proceeded then to use to foment terror around the world, which any thinking human being would know that this is what they were going to do. So I think this, coupled with Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, giving all our uranium to Russia, which then kicked it to Iran. I think this is going to be a nice, fun rabbit hole to get into once this is all said and done.
Angela, because we're short on time, this first block. Ron, let's bring you in. Your thoughts.
Well, first of all, I wholeheartedly disagree with Angela. This was a unilateral attack from President Trump without the authority and consent of Congress, which is unconstitutional. I think that this shows that he is derelict in his duties and he is a dictator in chief. This should not have happened. There was no proof, even from his own intelligence. Talisi Goodrich said there was no direct evidence of Iran having nuclear weapons. So this was unprovoked, and this is going to lead us into a direct war. There's going to be retaliation, and I'm hopeful that our American troops aren't as dangerous, but this will be blood on President Trump's hands.
All right, Brian, let's bring you in there. You grew up, or at least you were born in Iran. You're an American citizen now. Your thoughts about the direction the United States is going in this conflict?
Thank you for having me, Isaiah. I have to disagree with Representative Reynolds. When we chant, we claim it in campaign speeches, peace through strength. This was a perfect example of our president using his strength. And I was born in Iran. This regime for the last 47 years been persistent on two things: the destruction of Israel and destruction of the United States. And sooner or later, we had to face this enemy face on.
All right, let's bring in Dr. von Biedenfeld. Your thoughts about this and the direction that the United States is going. And is this the extent of our involvement right now?
Well, unfortunately, it will not be the extent of our involvement because we have now awakened certain international law questions, certain behaviors and questions from our alliances. And of course, Congress is not unified in supporting the president. While I don't believe it is illegal what the president did, there was very little consultation with Congress. Some of that is practical, but some of these processes, particularly with the rule of law, are intentionally slow to allow for deliberation, allow for the development of alliances, as we saw after 9/11, and build partnerships, or at least pursue diplomacy as we were on track to do before Israel strikes. At the end of the day, I think this was an appropriate exercise of the Article 2 power of the president, but I think that Iran must respond now, and unfortunately, civilians and soft targets are going to bear the brunt of that threat because, as we've seen with the attack on Qatar, and as we'll see with other attacks with the Iron Dome, Iran really doesn't have the military capacity to retaliate in kind. So they're going to have to find civilians and other soft targets to, in their minds, offer reprisal for the attacks.
And Dr. Brown, there's a difference between a declaration of war, which require Congress getting involved, and what the president did, or is there a difference for those who may be wondering, can he do this as commander in chief as long as there's not a declaration of war?
Well, precedent says that he can. Absolutely. We've had.
Well, we need to know what you think he can do, not what the president says.
No, I said precedent. I'm sorry.
Okay, got it.
We've had lots of examples of presidents, including Donald Trump when he did it in Syria, using his presidential powers to use military force without the consent of Congress. You do have to have some notification. You do have to go through some procedures, but we haven't declared war in a very long time. Even Vietnam was not a declared war. So we have a lot of examples where the president is able to use this power. Barack Obama did it. Bill Clinton did it. George W. Bush did it. Donald Trump has done it before. So that precedent is set, and the president can use this power.
All right. And guys, we're going to take a quick break here to continue this discussion, the conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East. So don't you go anywhere. Our guests will be back, and we'll hear more from them, including Angela Box, here on The Factor Uncensored. Stay with us. And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. We're reviewing the conflict in Iran right now involving United States, Iran, and Israel. Angela, what we saw from many Republicans, there was a divide. Some of them saying they were not for this, many of them saying that this is not what makes America great again. We need to focus on America and not get involved with conflicts overseas. For those Republicans who are not supporting President Trump, what would you tell them? Or do you disagree?
Well, it is, it's very interesting. A lot of Republicans, I will remind everybody, had no problem with about $350 billion of our tax dollars being laundered over in the Ukraine, an endless war of all endless wars. The left this last weekend, donned another outfit to go support the mullahs of Iran. I mean, it is comical if it was not so serious. Van Jones, who I rarely agree with, said it perfectly this weekend. He said, listen, Iran is not a normal country, all right? They make women, they will stone a woman to death if she shows a little hair. They will throw gays and lesbians off roofs in the middle of Pride Month without batting an eye, I might add. So this whole idea that Republicans are divided on this, I understand MAGA's reticence in wanting to support any kind of boots on the ground troops. President Trump, J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, everyone has said that is not what this is going to be. These have been targeted strikes on nuclear facilities that I will continue to remind Democrats that Barack Obama allowed to occur.
All right. And Brian, let's talk about the people of Iran. If you've kept in touch with relatives there, are they looking for a regime change? Are they looking for new leadership there? Do they agree with the leadership in what they're doing? Your thoughts?
That's a great question, Isaiah. From my view, from the people on the ground that I speak with on a daily, about 80% of the population are held hostage by the same regime that we have as our enemy in front of us. So the 80% of the people are waiting for opportunity to actually rise up. And the regime is so coherent on being a good dictator, so any opposition voice is squashed in Iran immediately. But thanks to the efforts of IDF and Israel over the past few weeks, the regime is very weakened. And what happened during this past weekend by the United States has put the regime on the collapse. So when we say regime change, everybody automatically thinks about the Iraq war, boots on the ground. This regime is very different from the Saddam Hussein regime, and they literally are on the verge of collapse.
Representative Reynolds, if you have many of the people of this country saying it's time for a change, we need new leadership, what's wrong with the president taking these? And of course, the president said this is not about regime change, but if you want to make Iran great again, you get some new leaders. But if the people are saying we don't want to live like this anymore, what's wrong with the United States intervening?
Well, first of all, President Trump campaigned on ending wars, not starting them. I mean, he campaigned that he was going to make sure that in his first days in office that he was going to end these senseless conflicts. And so that's what he campaigned on. So he's breaking his campaign promises and his pledge to the American people that he was not going to engulf us in additional wars, and that he's doing just the opposite of that. And so I don't believe that it is in America's interest to intervene. If you look at the polls are overwhelmingly against, with both Democrat and Republicans, against additional wars. In fact, his closest allies, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, have chastised President Trump. There are many on the right that are saying this is the wrong direction. And so I think that it is hypocrisy for President Trump to now be getting us in a war when he told the American people that he was getting us out of war. So this conflict could lead to World War III. We see that China and Russia—
And we're going to stop you right there. We're going to take a break. We'll come back and we'll let you pick up Representative Reynolds. We'll be back with more Factor Uncensored as we talk about Iran with our guests here on the show tonight. Stay with us. And welcome back to the Factor Uncensored. Our guests are joining us as we talk about the conflict in the Middle East. Representative Reynolds, pick back up for us, sir.
My fear is that President Trump is dangerously getting us closer to a World War III. We know that China and Russia are allies of Iran, and we know that they have both warned President Trump of not escalating into war with Iran. So my concern is that this could lead to a nuclear war. I hope that it doesn't. I hope that cooler heads prevail. But that is precisely what the intelligence community is warning us against, precisely since there was no evidence that Iran had these weapons, these nuclear warheads, that the agreement that President Barack Obama had entered over years ago was working. And so the final thing I want to say is that this is nothing more than President Trump wanting to undo something that Obama did. This is nothing more.
Dr. Von Biedenfeld, let's bring you back in. Is there a concern about there actually being nuclear weapons there, or at least the ability to build nuclear weapons, having the knowledge to continue their research in order to get those nuclear weapons?
I think there is a serious concern. We did see this with Israel. They set the precedent for nuclear weapons being developed secretly in misleading the United States throughout the 60s. So Israel actually set this precedent that now Iran is following for secret weapons development. I think it's a very real concern. I don't think that it's as close maybe as some people think, but it's very possible. But one of the distinctions that I would make in involving ourselves is less about, again, the president's power, but some of this international precedent for how we are approaching this intervention. And I'm not as worried in the same way that BRICS cannot be as successful as the United States dollar because of how these countries such as China, Russia, Iran operate. Their governmental systems, how they interact with their citizens is not the same as the United States. So I'm not as worried about World War III in this intervention as I might be for how China uses this precedent to interact with Taiwan and that sort of South China area. So we may be setting a dangerous precedent. And I think a bigger issue with MAGA might be the DOGE aspect of the thousands of dollars of operating costs and the millions of dollars it costs to drop these bombs when we have already invested billions of dollars. As Angela mentioned, in Ukraine, we invest billions of dollars in providing in-kind aid, military equipment, and funding to Israel already for their own self-defense. And so our interaction is going to be costly regardless. But I think the bigger challenge as far as a larger escalation of this conflict is going to be further down the road when China or Russia use this U.S. involvement and intervention to justify harassment of their neighbors as Russia is doing.
And really quick, Dr. Branham, last 30 seconds we have here, your concerns about this escalating to a possible major conflict like World War III.
Yeah, I don't agree that it's the same as China attacking Taiwan, but they may make that logical conclusion on this. But as far as the justification for doing it, I mean, no, we don't have proof that they have nuclear weapons, but we do know that they spent billions of dollars hiding what they were doing in an attempt to process this uranium and make a nuclear bomb.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here on The Factor Uncensored. We'll come back with our guests and continue this discussion after the break. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. We're talking about the conflict in the Middle East. Our guests are here. Brian, your thoughts about what we're seeing? Do we see this escalating to something bigger, possibly World War III, like many of our guests have said tonight?
Well, looking at things like World War III, if you look at World War II, nobody knew the beginning point of it till years later. And if you ask me, I think World War III already started when Russia invaded Ukraine for the second time. And all of those happened because of the weaknesses of the Democratic Party. We are here today because Joe Biden opened up the banks for the financing for the Iranian regime to use those funds for their proxies all around the globe. So the notion that the Islamic Republic is not in pursuit of attaining nuclear weapons is just a basic rhetoric. The Atomic Agency just 2 weeks ago acknowledged that they were. We have intelligence that they've been working at it for years. Do they have one? No. But if you wait for them to get nuclear weapons, we're dealing with a regime like North Korea, which at that point is going to be too late to do anything. So escalation, I think Iran is at the point that it's weak, and the attack today on Qatar is very evident that they don't want to escalate this further. But at the same time, I don't believe that Israel and IDF are just going to sit idly by when the regime is this vulnerable. They're going to take advantage of this opportunity because, in my view, 100% they're pushing for regime change. And I believe the area in the Middle East and the Iranian...
I'm going to stop you right there, Brian, because it seems like Angela has a new ally here. So we'll continue this conversation. But for those who are wondering, why should the average American care about this, guys? Why should anybody care about this?
May I respond?
Yeah.
Because Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terror around the world. Joe Biden has let in millions and millions of illegal aliens. Many of them, we know, come from Iran. Tom Cotton over the weekend was saying, listen, guys, there are sleeper cells in this country that Joe Biden let in illegally and just let them in. This is the stuff we're dealing with. Now, I don't necessarily agree it's going to be World War III. I do not. I think Trump is showing incredible leadership, and the Democrats are stupid. They are very, very dumb people, because instead of getting on board with getting rid of the #1 world sponsor of terror, they can't, because their buddy Barack Obama set this pinky promise deal up in the first place. And Trump goes over to the G7 last week and gets every single leader, who do not like him, by the way, gets every single leader to say, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Nobody wants a nuclear war. Nobody wants that. This is going to be decisive. It's going to be quick. And I pray that the Iranian people who have been under the boot of these psychopaths for 40-something years rise up and take their country back and make Iran great again.
Well,
Go ahead, guys.
Isaiah, here's the problem. His own National Intelligence Director, Tulsi Gabbard, contradicts President.
Tulsi.
She contradicted him. And then he came in and said she's wrong without any type of evidence. So it doesn't seem as though President Trump is using facts. He's using his emotions.
Well,
all right, guys, and let's continue down the path of why should the average American care about this?
Yeah, I think the bigger issue is, again, as we mentioned, Iran, we know, is a state sponsor of terror. Twice now, President Trump's administrations have taken the head off of these very elite troops and areas that Iran sends out to train others in terrorist activity. We do have a porous border. We don't know if there are sleeper cells being brought in because we don't exactly track who is coming into the country. So it's very possible that there are Chinese agents, Iranian agents, and others that are a threat to the United States. And as long as Iran has a cohesive government, they are able to organize and distribute and diffuse these sleeper cells or terrorist agents throughout the world, or money to sponsor aggrieved parties. So I think that's the biggest issue. But the other issue is, how much is this going to cost and what the retaliation looks like, because Iran simply does not have the sophistication to meet the U.S. in a direct combat battle. Their Navy isn't equipped for it. Their Air Force isn't equipped for it. Their Army isn't. So the only recourse Iran has is to hit soft targets, which would include U.S. civilians.
All right, Dr. Branham.
I have to say, I agree that, this is a time when Iran is in a very vulnerable spot. I mean, this doesn't happen very easily, very often. But this is a time when President Trump saw that he could make this hit, Presidents have been looking for this opportunity for decades, and now he has this opportunity and he jumped on it. So I'm hoping that this is going to make the world a better place, a safer place. And the fact that he made this attack will actually stop World War III instead of start it.
All right. We want to thank you all for joining us here on The Factor Uncensored. We appreciate your time. We'll continue to monitor what goes on in the Middle East. It will impact us in some form or fashion. Well, it's gas prices or the price of food, or there is actual violence. So make sure you continue to monitor this situation around the world.